Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about JavaScript objects and how can we perform shallow and deep copy of those objects. So as you can see in my screen, let's start writing some JavaScript code. To start with, I'm creating a developer object and with only one property. And then if I create another developer object and assign it the previous developer one object, and if I log this to developer objects, I would essentially see that both of them are printing out the same thing. So far so good. I have both of these objects printing out the same object in here, but the problem is objects are reference types. So the moment I have executed line number 3, what actually is happening, the developer 2 is actually having a copy of the memory address for developer 1. So essentially, if I happen to change anything on developer 2, let's say I give it a name to Vishnu, remember my colleague's name, and if I happen to execute this again, I would see that even the first developer's name is changed. So this is an example of a shallow copy where I have copied developer 1 into developer 2, and as a result of that, when I change the developer 2, I get the same change reflected into developer 1. So there are several ways to avoid this, and to do so, how we can do is, first thing I wanted to show you is through Object.asign, and instead of running line number 3, if I run Object.asign and give it an empty object, which is my target object, the new object that I'm going to create, and the source object is developer 1. So in this case, I am creating an empty object from the developer 1, and then if I change developer 2's name to Vishnu again, in this case, if I run this code, you would see that the developer 2 has independently changed its name from Nilanjan to Vishnu. However, developer 1 is still kept intact. There is another way of doing the same thing, achieving the same result, is using the ES6 spread operator. So here I am spreading out developer 1 and creating another object from it and assigning it to developer 2. And if I run this, I am expecting the same result. Developer 2 independently changed its name to Vishnu. But this is not a foolproof solution, you see. The moment I start getting a nested object inside my first object, so let's say I have now skills added to it, and this is a nested object, and as a primary, let's say full stack, and here I have a secondary, let's say DevOps, and now I have a nested object inside the developer 1, and when I'm creating developer 2 with either a spread operator or through Object.asign, I could also access developer 2's skills, the primary, and let's say I change it to front end. Okay, if I happen to do so, the problem is the moment I have a nested object, using either a spread operator or Object.asign doesn't really perform a full deep clone. As you can see here, my Nilanjan developer's primary skill is also changed from full stack to front end. Okay, there is a typo, and no, front end. Okay, so if I run it again, you would see the same result. Okay, so that's not good. That's not something we want here to be copied. We want this to be changed independently, this developer 2 and developer 1 also. So how we can achieve this further is by letting this go Okay, so we don't want this to happen. We saw this Object.assign and spread operator essentially performs a partial deep copy. So what we can do is we can do JSON.parse and then we do JSON.stringify the source object, which is the developer one. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually stringifying the developer one into a JSON string and then again parsing that JSON string and creating another object from it. So this is an example of how we can do deep clone. Let's say if I run it now, and as you can see here successfully, I have Nilanjan and the skills still remaining full stack. And even though I have changed the developer 2's skills and name, they are changing independently. So JSON parse and JSON stringify works absolutely well until and unless you have a catch here. If you happen to have, let's say, some functions here, okay, let's say for the sake of demo, calculate age, and here I have a function, an anonymous one, of course, and for now, let's say return 30. Okay, if I do the JSON stringify, let it be here just for the demo, and also let's say I have joining date. Okay, just for the sake of demo, I create a date object. Okay, something interesting happens the moment I do JSON.parse and JSON.stringify. Let's execute this code and we'll see what did I do wrong? Okay, this is not required. Let's clean it off. Ta-da! So as you can see here, the function that I had in calculate age in my first source developer one is missing, is totally lost when we did JSON parse, JSON stringify on the developer 2 right here. Another thing to notice is the date, the joining date is no more an object on developer 2, the developer Vishnu. It's a string object. We could quickly check that. Here we can log the type of developer 1 dot joining date, and okay, I can just manage the braces correctly. And if I do the same thing here for developer 2, you would see again, let me clear this and run it again, and you would see this is the type of where it is coming from is an object, whereas this is string. That means for certain types, as an example date, the type, original type is lost when we run JSON parse and JSON stringify when we are doing deep cloning. So as evident here, we could see a couple of things which are missing with JSON parse and JSON string. One is the function. If I happen to have a nested function inside of inside an object, and I then copy it in developer 2 through JSON parse and JSON stringify, although on surface it looks like a deep cloning, my function is lost, and also I lose my types, especially for an example date. So what do I do? Are there any clean approaches for that? Fortunately, yes. For that, what we have to do is, I personally rely on certain libraries. So one cool library is the lodash. So I'm just going to install the lodash here, and it would be fast to get it loaded. And the moment I have this loaded, let me include this here. So I have lodash loaded, and now if I want to copy this string, what I would do is use this lodash Yeah. So there is this clone deep, and I give here, and I do not need this anymore. Okay. So what I'm doing here, just to format it clearly, now I have the developer 2 and I'm using the lodash. Remember, I have this constant and I'm loading lodash library. This is the third-party library. I have just now installed it. And now I'm using its function clone, deep clone, and the rest of the things remain same. And now if I run this code, I'm just clearing this off. And if I run this code, you would see I do have, let me save it first. And here I run it again, and I do have all the faults we had in the previous approaches rectified, and my Nilanjan is having the skills, calculate age function, joining date, and joining date is an object. And the one which we just now did a deep clone is having Vishnu, scales are intact. I do get the calculate age function as it was, and joining date here is an object. So as we saw here, different ways of copying an object, JavaScript object. We learned first few of the partial deep cloning techniques, like using the Object.asign and using the spread operator, and soon we could realize that if I happen to have a nested object inside, then this two techniques don't work. And then we looked at it, JSON.parse and JSON stringify. They seems to be giving us the right answer for nested object. However, they don't work with functions and types. Then we installed quickly a library lodash, a third-party library, to the npm installation, and then we used its method clone, deep clone, cloning it deeply, and then we could see that everything works as we have expected. So here is that quick tips I wanted to share, quick tutorial I wanted to share. How do we deal with JavaScript objects and the shallow copy and deep copy of it?